In the 1st century AD, the greatest naturalist of the Roman Empire went with full confidence that silk was combed from the leaves of trees. He was the most educated man in the Western world. And he was dead wrong. 500 years later, the truth was still a secret until two men walked into the most powerful palace in the Western world, carrying nothing but the robes on their backs and two bamboo walking sticks. When those sticks were split open, the balance of power between East and West shifted forever. This is the story of how the greatest technology monopoly in human history, 3,000 years in the making, was broken by the lowest tech heist imaginable. To grasp how audacious this heist was, you first have to understand what silk meant to the ancient world. Before the 6th century AD, exactly one place on Earth could produce silk: China. Not because other nations lacked ambition. The production process was simply too complex, an interlocking biological system so tightly guarded it might as well have been sorcery. First, you had to raise a fantastically delicate creature, the silkworm. More temperamental than a panda, it ate nothing but fresh mulberry leaves. The slightest shift in temperature or humidity could wipe out an entire colony overnight. Then came the crucial step. Within a precise window after the worm spun its cocoon, you had to boil it, yes, boil the creature alive. Then you drew out a filament so fine, it was nearly invisible to the naked eye. A single cocoon could yield nearly a kilometer of unbroken thread, but the faintest unevenness of tension would snap it like a spider's web in the wind. Finally, you needed specialized looms to weave these filaments thinner than a human hair into cloth that shimmered as if woven from liquid light. Miss any single step, and you got nothing. Chinese dynasties guarded this knowledge with lethal seriousness. Reveal the rearing technique's death. Smuggle silkworm eggs across the border, your entire clan. Executed. Merchants along the Silk Road sold only the finished product, not a whisper about how it was made. The result bordered on the absurd. The entire Western world consumed silk in vast quantities, yet for centuries, no one even knew whether it came from an animal, a plant, or the earth itself. Remember that Roman naturalist? He wasn't an outlier. He was the norm. The information blackout was total. The most hopelessly addicted consumer was the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. In Byzantium, silk was not merely a fabric, it was power made visible. The emperor's purple robes, silk. The archbishop's vestments, silk. Diplomatic gifts to foreign kings, silk. Bribes to barbarian chieftains who might otherwise sack a province, silk. To run out of silk was to run out of authority. Yet Byzantium could not produce a single thread. Every bolt either crossed thousands of miles from China along the Silk Road or passed through the hands of middlemen in the Sasanian Persian Empire. And those middlemen were the real problem. The Persians sat squarely astride the Silk Road. They bought low from the east, then marked the price up tenfold for the west. The gold Byzantium bled on silk each year could have funded entire military campaigns. Worse still, Persia was Byzantium's sworn enemy. The two empires were perpetually at war, and every time hostilities flared, the Persians' first move was predictable: cut the silk route. Imagine suing Qualcomm while spending billions buying their chips each year. Your lifeline gripped in the fist of your rival. Emperor Justinian I was driven to desperation. He tried importing silk by sea through India. The Persian navy intercepted the shipments. He tried allying with the Turkic Khaganate to force open a new steppe route. The distances were greater. The costs even steeper. The Persians applied diplomatic pressure on the Turks, and that route collapsed too. Every conventional path was blocked. The historian Procopius tells us Justinian was a man who barely slept, pacing the palace corridors deep into the night, turning problems over in his mind until dawn. By now, the silk problem must have consumed those sleepless hours entirely. The brutal arithmetic was clear. Unless Byzantium could make silk on its own, Persia would bleed the treasury dry, not in battle, but in trade. What he needed was not a new road. He needed the source code, the biological secret locked away by China for 3,000 years. Around 552 AD, two men appeared at the gates of Justinian's court in Constantinople. They were Nestorian Christian monks. Their background was unusual as missionaries. They had spent years wandering through Central Asia and the deep interior of the Far East. In that era, monks could cross borders that soldiers could not. No guard would search the threadbare belongings of a wandering ascetic. But what they carried was not scripture. It was intelligence. These monks claimed to have lived in Serinda, the Byzantine name for China's silk-producing heartlands. They had not merely glimpsed the process. They had observed it, season after season, until they understood every step. They told the emperor the truth that had eluded the West for millennia. Silk did not grow on trees. It came from a worm, a tiny creature that fed on mulberry leaves, spun fine threads from its own body, and sealed itself inside a cocoon of pure fiber. For Justinian, this was seismic, not just knowledge a key. These monks were offering to go back and bring out living silkworm eggs. Justinian summoned them to a private audience. The deal was struck in the shadows. Go back east, bring the eggs out alive. Money, titles, protection, name your price. The monks accepted the commission. Then they disappeared down the long road that led from the golden domes of Constantinople into the unknown. No chronicle records their names. No manuscript preserves their faces. What survives is the shape of their journey, and the shape alone is staggering. Constantinople to China's silk regions, over 7,000 kilometers, one way, a round trip of at least 2 years. The route crossed every landscape designed to kill travelers. The wind-scoured plateau of Persia enemy territory, where being identified as Byzantine agents meant execution. The Pamirs Mountains, where passes climbed above 4,000 meters and the air thinned until your lungs burned. And beyond the mountains, the Taklamakan Desert, a name that, in the local tongue, means go in and you won't come out. Picture two men standing at the edge of that desert. No weapons, no escort, just monastic robes, a water skin, and 2 bamboo canes with a death sentence sealed inside each one. Because that was the plan. Every wandering monk carried a walking stick. Bamboo is naturally hollow. Silkworm eggs are no larger than sesame seeds. The monks had packed the eggs into the hollow cores of their canes and sealed the openings with wax. To any border guard, any bandit, any suspicious official, just 2 battered walking sticks, not worth a second glance. The earliest technology smuggling container in recorded history. No lockboxes, no microfiche. 2 sticks of bamboo. But the eggs were alive. Without the right temperature and humidity, they would die somewhere on the road, and all of this would be for nothing. For 2 years, across deserts and mountain passes and freezing nights, the monks had to keep those invisible specks viable while drawing no attention to the sticks they never let go of. On the high passes of the Pamirs, where temperatures plunged far below freezing, the wax seals would have grown brittle. A single crack, a gust of dry mountain wind reaching the eggs, and 2 years of walking would have ended in a handful of dust. Every frozen night was a gamble. Every border checkpoint, a held breath. We do not know how many times they nearly failed. What we know is that they did not. When the monks finally returned to Constantinople, they were brought before Justinian. The bamboo canes were split open with care. Inside, Nestled in wax lay the pinpoint-sized eggs still alive. 3,000 years of monopoly, punctured by 2 walking sticks and the nerve of 2 nameless men. Justinian moved fast. He established state-run sericulture farms and silk workshops across the empire. Mulberry trees were planted in Greece and Asia Minor, where the Mediterranean climate proved ideal. Within years, the first bolt of Byzantine-made silk came off the looms. The early product was rough. It could not rival the gossamer finesse of Chinese masters who had refined their craft across 100 generations. But it was enough. Byzantium could now clothe its own court, supply its own diplomats, bribe its own barbarians. The stranglehold was broken. The shockwaves rippled outward for centuries. Persian middlemen, who had grown fat on the markup, watched their profits collapse almost overnight. A trade route that had moved gold eastward for generations suddenly lost its leverage. The balance of economic power along the Silk Road shifted permanently. Then, the secret kept spreading, and no one could stop it. When Arab armies swept through the Byzantine provinces of Syria and Egypt, they captured silk workshops intact and learned. They carried sericulture to North Africa, to Sicily, to the Iberian Peninsula. By the 12th century, the Norman king Roger II of Sicily raided Greek silk towns and forcibly relocated their weavers to Palermo. From there, the craft leapt to Lucca, to Venice, to Florence. Lyon would later crown itself the silk capital of the world. A monopoly held for 3 millennia, unraveled in a few generations, because once a secret escapes, it cannot be recaptured. It was like ink dropped into water. You can watch it spread. You cannot push it back. Looking back at this oldest known case of industrial espionage, the pattern is almost eerily familiar. Chinese dynasties had done everything right by the logic of monopoly. The Larnas were savage. Reveal the technique, and your bloodline ends. Geography helped the Pamirs, the Taklamakan, the sheer brutal distance. The information blackout was so total that the greatest minds of the West couldn't even correctly identify the source organism. And yet, all those defenses fell to the 2 least suspicious people on Earth. 2 penniless monks, armed with the lowest tech smuggling device imaginable, 2 sticks of bamboo. Because a technology monopoly is, at its core, an information asymmetry. And the enemy of information asymmetry is not higher walls. It is the one force that has never been successfully contained in all of human history. The hunger of those who do not have for what those who do have. You can monopolize a worm. You cannot monopolize an era's hunger for silk. That concludes the story of the Great Silk Heist. ASML's lithography machines, NVIDIA's GPU architecture, TSMC's 3nm process, which one do you think will be the next silk? And who are today's monks? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this kind of deep dive into the commercial logic behind history is your thing, hit subscribe and stay tuned for the next one.